Speaking for the grotesques, I'd have to disagree. Death is so final, whereas life is full of possibilities.
That is not a man making a joke. That is a man surviving one. Tyrion Lannister just watched his brother call a broken child a grotesque. And rather than flinch, rather than let a single second of pain cross his face, he folded the damage into philosophy, into warmth, into wisdom. That is what armor looks like when it has been worn so long the man inside cannot take it off. To calculate the atmospheric pressure of this Winterfell breakfast hall, we must understand what each person at this table is actually protecting. The morning after Bran Stark fell from a tower window, 3 Lannisters are sitting together in a castle that is not theirs, eating food prepared by people who already suspect something is wrong. Cersei needs this meal to be unremarkable. She needs no questions, no pointed observations, no little brother with sharp eyes reading the room correctly. Jaime needs normalcy, the performance of a family that has done nothing except visit the north and prepare to leave. What Tyrion needs is different from both of them entirely. He needs to exist in this room without punishment. He needs to take up space inside a family that has never once offered him that without condition. He has no army. He has no sword. He cannot intimidate with his body or his name alone. The only currency he has ever successfully spent in a room full of Lannisters, in any room, is his ability to make the moment slightly less unbearable for everyone around him, including himself. That is the bargain he has been running since he was old enough to read his father's face. That is what this scene is really about.
Bread and 2 of this little fish. And a mug of dark beer to wash it down.
And bacon, burnt black.
Listen to that order before a single word of psychology is applied. Burnt black. Not well done. Not crispy. Tyrion does not want his bacon cooked correctly. He wants it overdone, past the point of care, as though the standard of good food is a threshold he refuses to acknowledge. There is a man in this who has learned that small acts of deliberate excess, ordering the most, eating the most, drinking the most, are the only forms of entitlement his body is allowed to perform without being mocked for it. He cannot be tall, he cannot be feared, but he can be the one at the table who eats burnt bacon and dares anyone to comment the room is already tense before he speaks. Cersei and Jaime are carrying a secret that sits between them like a body. Tyrion walks into that weight and immediately places his order. He does not read the silence. He fills it. And filling silence is not confidence. It is the reflex of a man who learned early that silence in a Lannister room always costs the smallest person at the table the most. The unconscious conversion of psychological pain into socially acceptable performance. Wit, warmth, or humor deployed not to entertain, but to prevent the room from registering the wound underneath. Tyrion is the only person at this table who says Bran's name out loud. Cersei cannot say it. The name is a liability. Jaime will not say it. But Tyrion, who had nothing to do with the fall, who carries only the name and not the act, he asks directly, is Bran going to die? Not because he is cruel, because he is the only one whose guilt is clean enough to afford the question. When the answer comes back, the boy may live, Tyrion does not celebrate, and he does not despair. He processes it through philosophy immediately. It is no mercy letting a child linger in such pain. This is shame camouflage at its most structural level. The discomfort of this situation, a child broken in a fall that his family caused, is converted in real time into a meditation on mercy, on suffering, on what the gods allow. The pain does not disappear. It gets redirected into something the room can respect. That is the mechanism. That is what it looks like from the outside when it is working perfectly.
Still can't believe you're going. It's ridiculous, even for you.
Where's your sense of wonder? The greatest structure ever built. The intrepid men of the Night's Watch. The wintry abode of the White Walkers.
Tell me you're not thinking of taking the black.
Jaime asked where Tyrion's sense of wonder is, and Tyrion answered. He answered with a list so deliberately absurd, so self-deflating. so eager to arrive at the punchline before the question could become sincere, that the room cannot hold the real answer long enough to examine it, because the real answer is not funny at all. Tyrion Lannister is going to the wall because he wants to stand somewhere that does not know his name. He wants to be diminished by geography instead of by lineage. He wants the wind at the edge of the world to be the thing that makes him feel small. Not his father's silence, not his sister's contempt, not Jaime's casual thoughtlessness. The joke about pissing off the edge of the world is one of the most quoted lines in the entire first season. The audience received it as proof of his charm. What it actually is, underneath the performance, is a man describing the only form of freedom his body has ever been permitted to imagine. The redirection of a painful or socially unacceptable impulse, grief, shame, rage, into a response that is not only acceptable but admired by the people who caused the original pain. The formal psychology of this moment is remarkably clean. Tyrion cannot say, "I am going to the wall because every room in Casterly Rock and King's Landing is a room that reminds me of what I am not." He cannot say that. Not in front of Cersei, not even in front of Jaime. So the impulse, the grief underneath the desire for escape, gets sublimated into wit, gets redirected into a line that earns laughter rather than sympathy. Sublimation does not look like pain. That is the entire architecture of it. It looks like a man who is extraordinarily comfortable with himself. But what it actually represents is a nervous system so well trained in the conversion of distress that the conversion has become automatic. The joke fires before Tyrion has time to feel the thing that triggered it.
Well, even if the boy lives, he'll be a cripple, grotesque. Give me a good, clean death any day.
Speaking for the grotesques, I'd have to disagree. Death is so final, whereas life is full of possibilities.
Jaime says the word grotesque and does not register that he has just described his own brother to his own brother's face. This is what chronic thoughtlessness does. Cruelty at least acknowledges that the other person is present. Thoughtlessness erases them. Tyrion has been erased this way his entire life, not with malice, but with the casual indifference of a family that has never had to think about what their words cost the smallest person in the room. Watch what happens in the next 4 seconds. Jaime wishes a broken child a clean death rather than a life in a damaged body. And Tyrion, who was called a grotesque the day he was born, who survived a father who openly wished his birth had killed him too, converts that direct hit into a meditation on the value of life. Speaking for the grotesques, he claims the category, he wraps himself in the label before Jaime can weaponize it, and then he philosophizes the wound so cleanly that Jaime does not even notice the wound was opened. The strategic naming of one's own vulnerability before others can deploy it, converting a potential weapon into a declared position that cannot be used for ambush. Speaking for the grotesques is not self-deprecation, it is tactical. When Tyrion claims the label first, he removes Jaime's ability to apply it with force. You cannot wound someone with a word they are already holding. This is a behavior Tyrion has refined across an entire childhood in a family where his body was the primary subject of every cruelty delivered to him. From Cersei's contempt to Tywin's silence to the court jesters who performed his humiliation for public entertainment. He learned that the safest position is the one you occupy before anyone else can push you into it. So he walks into the grotesque label before Jaime finishes the sentence, and the room applauds him. Death is so final, whereas life is full of possibilities. The audience receives that line as wisdom, as proof that Tyrion is the most philosophically evolved Lannister at the table. But look at what generated it. Look at the sequence. A man called a broken child a grotesque and wished him dead. And Tyrion, who is the broken child in every room he has ever been in, answered with philosophy. That is not wisdom. That is a man who has had so much practice converting wounds into sentences that he can do it without pausing to breathe.
I hope the boy does wake. I'd be very interested to hear what he has to say.
My dear brother, there are times you make me wonder whose side you're on.
My dear brother, you wound me. You know how much I love my family.
Read that last line without the smile. Strip the irony, strip the delivery, strip the performance entirely, and look at the raw architecture of what Tyrion just said. You wound me. You know how much I love my family. A man telling his brother that words cause damage. A man invoking family love inside a family that has never once extended that love to him without a condition attached. The use of tone, humor, or deliberate exaggeration to present a genuine emotional position in a form that can be immediately retracted if the room responds with rejection. Tyrion says he loves his family. He says it with a smirk. He says it in a register that signals, "Do not believe me, this is performance, we are all in on the joke together." But the joke is covering something real. That is the actual tragedy of this scene and of every scene he inhabits for 8 seasons. He loves a father who viewed his existence as a theft. He loves a sister who has wanted him dead since she was old enough to understand what dead meant. He loves a brother who calls broken children grotesque in front of the brother his family has always treated as less than whole. And rather than let any of that love register as the catastrophic vulnerability it actually is, rather than say it plainly and risk Jaime confirming or Cersei weaponizing it, he converts it into wit. He makes it ironic. He makes it deniable. He delivers it as a punchline so that when it is rejected, as it always has been, he can pretend he was never sincere. Ironic distancing does not protect against pain. It protects against the public evidence of pain. Tyrion can hurt in private. What he cannot afford is to hurt where the room can see it.
It's no mercy letting a child linger in such pain.
Only the gods know for certain. All the rest of us can do is pray.
Go back to this line. Go back to the moment before the wit assembled fully, before the jokes about Dorne and celibacy and the edge of the world. Tyrion heard that Bran might live broken, and he said, "That is no mercy." He said, "Let the gods decide." He said it with the calm of a man who has spent his entire life asking the same question in private. Is surviving in a body the world considers a mistake, a gift, or a sentence? Cersei and Jaime hear that line as a moral observation. The audience hears it as wisdom. But Tyrion is not making a general claim about suffering. He is speaking from the inside of a wound he has been carrying since the morning he was born, and his mother died, and his father first looked at him and decided that what he was looking at was a debt. The question of whether Bran should survive is, for Tyrion, the question of his own life, asked through the only distance he has available to him, which is philosophy, which is prayer, which is the language of someone who has learned to feel his most personal things in the most impersonal register possible. The unconscious redirection of an emotional response from its true target, the self, the wound, the family, onto an external object or person who is safer to feel about. Tyrion cannot grieve his own childhood in front of Cersei and Jaime. He cannot say, "I know what it is to survive in a form this family considers a mistake." He cannot make himself the subject. So, the grief gets displaced. Bran becomes the object onto which Tyrion can direct the feelings he has never been permitted to claim as his own. Speaking for the grotesques is the closest he comes to speaking for himself in this entire scene. Everything else is armor. Every joke is a wall. Every philosophical observation is a conversion of something private into something the room can admire. That is what displacement accomplishes. It keeps the wound invisible while letting the feeling go somewhere. And then he orders more beer, and the scene ends. And Tyrion walks out of Winterfell toward the wall and the edge of the world and 1,000 more rooms where the same armor will be needed. The armor was not built for war. The armor was built for breakfast tables. The armor was built for the specific experience of sharing a meal with people who love you conditionally and call broken children grotesque without looking at you. But here is what the show never told you. In George R.R. Martin's source material, Tyrion's relationship to his own wit is considerably darker than what the show allows on screen. In the novels, Tyrion reflects explicitly, in his own interior voice, on the fact that being the amusing dwarf has kept him alive in ways that being a Lannister never could. A Lannister who cannot fight and cannot intimidate is a liability, but an amusing dwarf is entertainment. Martin writes Tyrion, understanding this with cold clarity, that his value to his family and to every room he has ever occupied is the performance itself. That the moment the performance stops, so does whatever thin protection the Lannister name extends to him. The show gave Tyrion warmth. The books gave him the knowledge that warmth was strategy. That distinction reframes every joke in this Winterfell breakfast scene from charm into calculation, and makes the armor not just a defense mechanism that formed around a wound, but a survival contract Tyrion signed with himself the moment he was old enough to understand what his father's silence meant. The wit is real, the warmth is real, but underneath both of them is a man who knows precisely why he is funny and who has never once been allowed to stop. The behavioral pattern visible in this Winterfell hall has a direct modern equivalent. In any professional environment where someone has been structurally underestimated, by appearance, by background, by any category the room uses to pre-assign worth before a word is spoken, the most common adaptive response is not anger. It is preemptive self-deprecation. The person learns to make the diminishing joke before the room can. They learn to occupy the role of the amusing one, the self-aware one, the one who clearly does not take themselves too seriously. That performance neutralizes the threat of dismissal. It looks like extraordinary confidence. It is the opposite of confidence. It is a nervous system that has concluded that visibility is dangerous and that the only safe form of visibility is the one you control. The person who has mastered this moves fast, fills silence, arrives at the punchline before vulnerability can be registered. They become the most entertaining presence in the room. And they carry, underneath that performance, a question they have stopped asking out loud. What would happen if the armor came off? What would the room do with the person underneath? The armor worked. That is the most important and most devastating fact about Tyrion Lannister. The wit survived King's Landing. The self-deprecation survived the small council. The philosophical warmth survived a trial, a crossbow bolt, and 2 continents. Every room he walked into that wanted to diminish him, he diminished first, and he survived it. The armor was not vanity. The armor was architecture. It was built for a specific enemy, and it held. But a defense mechanism that works is not the same as a wound that healed. And a man who has been funny his entire life in order to survive does not know, when the war ends, whether the person who would have existed without the armor is still inside, or whether the armor has been there so long it has become the man himself. So here is the real question about Tyrion in this scene. Did the armor save him, or did it just make the wound more expensive to carry? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next.